The month of February this year will be a historic one as Nigerians will once again exercise their franchise on who they want to lead the affairs of the nation for the next 4 years. The electoral umpire, that is the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has slated the presidential and National Assembly elections for the 16th of February. That's not all. The polls for state governors and state houses of assembly will also be decided in the month of March as well. Huge, no doubt. Historically, Nigerian elections have been characterized by intense inter-party activities that sometimes lead to monumental violence, leaving in its wake loss of lives and property. To say some Nigerians are worried about the outcome of the 2019 elections will perhaps be stating the obvious. It has become a tradition for political parties to derail from issue-based campaigns to mudslinging and character assassination of their opponents. It begs the question, is it really necessary to go down this ruinous path? Excuse me. Most political parties engage in violence-inducing campaigns to score political points. Who really is to blame for the violence that has marked previous electoral exercises in Nigeria? How can we do away with this destructive trend in the electoral process in Nigeria? These and many more questions we will attempt to find answers to in the course of the program. This is Nigeria Today, and I am Dennis Adigunloye. Welcome to the program. All right, in the studio to discuss achieving violence-free campaigns is a legal practitioner and public affairs analyst in person of Mike Utsaha. Thank you for joining us on Nigeria Today.
My pleasure. Good evening, Nigeria.
All right, welcome. And also in the studio is Bola Bakare. He is the president of the Truth Be Told Network. You're also welcome to the program, sir.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. So, elections are fast approaching. In just a matter of a few weeks, the masses will be trooping out to, as I said, exercise their franchise. And of course, we're going to be discussing violence-free elections. Let me come to you, Mr. Bakare, first. What has been your observation so far in the trend in this election season with regards to comparisons with previous outings?
Thank you, my brother.
Yeah.
Looking at the situation from the perspective of Truth Be Told Network, the previous elections compared to this election in question, there is a disparity. Over the years, we've been having elections that were noisy at this time of the year, noisy, a lot of campaigning, a lot of rallying, a lot of money doling going on. But this time around, there is a lull. And the lull stems from the fact that the element of cash doling has been reduced drastically. So also is the legit funds that are spent on print media, electronic media, outdoor advertising. Because social media and the use of devices has come to the fore. These days, you can get across to 40 people, 100 people with 4 naira.
Yeah.
These days, you can send messages to 1,000 people at 1 naira a piece. So that kind of drops the funds that are being expended on media and publicity in electioneering. So that is being felt as it is. Some other factors that come to the fore is the fact that the incumbent government is trying to stick to the ceiling of say, okay, there is a ceiling as to how much you can spend or this or that. And then honestly, both parties, I mean the two majors, they are waiting or watching who's going to blink first. And I guess that's because if I say this is what's going to happen, I should be the first to practice it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are setting standards for subsequent elections. Because this one, I'm sure, will sit through without much of funds being disbursed. Loose funds, I would like to call them, being doled out, being mismanaged, and the rest of it. But that aside, the element of violence or non-violence, which I guess we're going to discuss tonight. I'll get to that when you throw the question.
All right, Mike, just to give us your own impressions of how things have turned out so far.
Thank you, Dennis. Looking at it from your intro, I think one might say that we have a really scary situation on our hands. Just before we came into the studio, Bola and I were having a conversation on the pockets of violence we have seen here and there since the campaign season began, and we reflected on what happened in Lagos. And of course, you know the famous MC Oluomo was stabbed, and we were talking about how gutty whoever did this is, you know. So we've seen a couple of incidences where campaign sessions have been disrupted by thugs, particularly in Lagos. But aside from Lagos, we have seen situations even in Akwa Ibom, which became a bit volatile even before the campaign season began. And a couple of, you know, situations here and there that don't portend any, you know, good for us. But by and large, like Bola has pointed out, there's been a lull in the campaign season this time around, and we were hoping, we had expected that, especially with the signing of the peace accord. And for me particularly, I was excited about the fact that it was not just a national thing. Most states have, for want of a better word, domesticated this process, and stakeholders have come up to say, we will abide by, you know, peaceful conduct of our campaigns and elections and all of that. So we've not really seen a significant level of adherence to the commitments that have been made by our politicians. And I talk about the politicians, even if they are not exchanging punches themselves, they have not been able to rein in their supporters like one would expect. And that is why you would see, and even where punches are not being physically exchanged, you go on social media and you see the exchanges between supporters on either side, and you wonder whether we are in a war situation or we are in a campaign season, really, you know.
All right.
But again, having said that, Dennis, I must point out, I do this each time I have opportunity to do an assessment of the political process in Nigeria. It is only in May of this year that we would have 20 years of unbroken democracy. If you follow the campaign season in the United States, the campaign season that led to the election of President Trump, you would see that the politicians, particularly even within the parties, the GOP, for instance, it was an acerbic kind of campaign. You saw insults of small man and they went really very low. What am I saying in essence? It is worrisome when we see pockets of violence here and there and all of that. But this shouldn't let us or lead us to the point where we will lose faith in the democratic process in Nigeria. I think these things are fairly normal. I mean, it sounds irresponsible for me to say it's a normal situation, but as we progress in the democratic process, things like this are to be expected. And as I'm sure as we go along in the program, we'll have opportunity to say what stakeholders like law enforcement and all of that should do to, you know, contain the situation.
All right, Bola, Mike brought up an issue with regards to the United States and how they're not exactly exempt from violence or, you know, mudslinging in their campaigning. So this is not really something that's just peculiar to Nigeria alone.
That's right.
Yeah. So what would you have to say about that?
Let me excuse me. Let me give us a breakdown of that word, violence. From the angle of truth be told, we don't bandy. It's like everybody has bandied the word violence to mean one-on-one, group-on-group, party-on-party, and the rest of it. But I would like to make it clear here. There are about 6 or 7 brands of violence. There is the violence from a mean-spirited person that really wants to kill, maim, or otherwise. There is the violence I will call pseudo-violence, like in the case of our brother, fella, it says a lot of steam and nothing happens. That is shakara. There is the violence of intimidation, where you beat but you don't kill.
Yeah.
Right? There is the violence of interparty violence, where my intimidation or my noise making might get me the upper hand. But like my brother said, thank God for the peace accord.
Yeah. That
interparty violence has been reduced. I will run you an inference for 2015. When Jonathan hugged Buhari at the peace accord, or so to speak, honestly, it gave confidence to all parties concerned that if our two principals can do this, we better watch our ways. Yeah. That was what gave birth to the situation of Jega and Urubebe. Jega was reeling out the results. Urubebe was mad at him.
Yeah.
But Jega had the confidence that the two principals
have contacted
themselves, so don't let me bother about this man.
Reacting.
That was what happened, and it gave us a situation where Jonathan picked up the phone and congratulated President Buhari while the counting had not been completed.
Yes.
So these are situations of violence I'm trying to cost you. The other one is the situation of Lagos. It wasn't political. It was violence for positioning. It was violence between Nigerian Union of Road Transport Workers. You see, the erstwhile chairman was due to leave. And then the upcoming upstarts are trying to say, who's going to be the toughest? And that created that situation on ground. Right now, people are bandying the fact that there was violence at APC rally. I am not holding brief for anyone here. But I told some people that if you watch the clip, look at the stage, you will see that everybody that came for APC rally had their uniforms on. The boys that were doing the fighting were in their usual garb. Torn outfits, jeans, this and that and that. That transpired.
Right.
And again, the last but not the least, the violence that is tricky. And that are called, there is some kind of violence that is self-inflicted to create sympathy. There is the violence self-inflicted so that you can lay blame on the other party.
That's right.
So if you look at all these brands of violence, then it can give us a chance to now say, oh, this violence is self-inflicted. My brother, one of my brothers did that lately. I don't want to mention names here.
All right.
So, okay, so based on all these parameters, I guess we can go ahead from there, expand on it, and then at the end of the day, look for solutions, because that's the crux of the matter.
All right, so interesting perceptions that we're getting from our two guests. You're watching Nigeria Today, and we're discussing achieving violence-free campaigns. We'll now take the program to the streets to gauge the thoughts of Nigerians on their perceptions on how we can achieve violence-free campaigns. We'll be right back.
You can avoid a violent-free campaign by the way you sell your candidate, you know, the way you sell your candidate, and not by hate, not by insulting another candidate.
We have never witnessed this. That campaign election in the country less than a month, but things are calm. Okay, it wasn't like before. Things of governance are moving. It mustn't be violence. What you know you did to people, you sell yourself to people.
Barely 1 month, the country is relatively calm. The rate of awareness is on cost. At the same time, maturity have insight into most of Nigerians now compared to the previous years or compared to 2015.
Yes, it's possible you can achieve violence-free campaign. And there's some campaign you can do without making troubles. You try to gather up people, you can dialogue, and after dialoguing, something good might come up from it. So
election is not do and die affair, that it is people that are going to elect you and you are going there to serve the masses. Then if the masses did not elect you, then you should not try to cause violence.
We're back in the studio with Mike Utsaha and Bola Bakare on the issue of achieving violence-free campaigns. The program, of course, is Nigeria Today. Let me come to Mike Utsaha. You heard some of the comments of members of the public there. We've talked about some the pockets of violence that have occurred in Lagos and other parts of the country. But from what you're hearing, okay, there's a few members of the public there, but they seem to be encouraged by the seeming more calmness as opposed to 4 years ago with regards to violence and unrest prior to elections. So what would you say?
You know, within the last 3 years, we've shed quite some chunk of blood in this country. So whether you're talking about Benue, you're talking about Kaduna, you're talking of Taraba, or Zamfara, you know, you just name it, even Katsina.
Yeah.
There's been quite some blood shed in this country. So if you compare that to the level of violence that we have seen within the last few weeks and days,
yeah,
it's nothing to compare, really. Right. So I mean, I tend to also agree with some of the respondents that maybe it's not as bad as it is, but we can do better. This is the point I am making.
Yeah.
And you know, we're witnessing a revolution, a technological revolution that has really enhanced progression towards the right direction in our political process. And I'll tell you why. So he spoke earlier on about the fact that you can reach millions of people with just 4 naira and all of that. But it's even a lot more than that. You can reach people with messages and targeted messages like, well, if you as a politician or as a candidate in the elections will not allow your kids to lead the way to perpetuate violence, then why should we be part of it? These are some of the messages that you're beginning to see out there. So a good number of young people, that energetic segment of the population that is usually used to perpetrate violence, are saying to themselves that, well, but wait a minute, it seems like there's some sense in this message.
That's correct.
If his kids are, there's one in particular that got me really excited. It is in Hausa language. You know, the guy is sending out folks to go and cause mayhem, and his wife and his son are on their way to go and cast their ballot, and he says, please stay away. There's going to be violence. The guys leave the house with some money in hand, but then they reflect on it and say, but why would he ask his wife and his son, who came all the way from abroad to be part of the political process, not to go? We're not going to be part of this process. So we're beginning to see more and more of these kinds of messages, and the easiest pathway is on social media.
Yeah.
So social media has also facilitated a great deal in the reduction of the level of violence that we ordinarily should see. And like I said earlier on, as we make progress, you know, and then this is something I say each time I do an assessment of our country, Nigeria, or some of our processes. With each passing 4 years, we make progress. Just take stock of what INEC has been able to do between 2015 and now. Even with the fact that we've not been able to amend our Electoral Act, there has been some progress. For the first time, we're seeing a display of candidates of political parties. It didn't happen the last time. I was a candidate in the elections in 2015. My name wasn't displayed at any time, you know. But now, we have not just that. INEC is telling you this is the total number of people who are on the register. This is the register. Please go through. This is the number of people who have collected, you know, their PVCs and all of that. So it gives greater confidence to the average Nigerian voter. And that should itself translate into a violence-free election. And there's a lot of work to be done by political parties. But even more than that, we all are responsible for creating a climate that is violence-free. It's not just the job of political parties, it's not just the job of the National Orientation Agency or indeed INEC. We are all responsible for ensuring that we have an environment in which we can feel free to cast our votes. Yeah,
all Nigerians certainly have their own critical roles to play in building on this democratic journey that is belongs to Nigeria. And Mr. Bola, we're reaching a milestone this year, 20 years of uninterrupted democratic rule in Nigeria. So, and like Mike was saying, new dimensions are coming out with regards to how INEC is conducting elections. So you'll be quite pleased with the progress that Nigeria is making.
Yeah, my brother. So far, so good.
Yeah.
But I would like to say this. Violence, non-violence has to do with the voter. I would like to throw this truthful challenge or this truthful bit to the voter, to the Nigerian voter.
Yeah.
You, the voter, if you are non-existent, there is no INEC. You, the voter, if you're not there, there is no political party.
That is true.
You, the voter, if you're not there, there is no violence. In other words, what I'm saying is, you, the voter, control everything. If INEC is putting up guidelines, jigging and rejigging guidelines, it's all for your sake as the voter. The political parties that are split along maybe 98 lines for presidential candidates, it's because you make up part of that political party. If you do not exercise your vote, there is no political party. And if you have a political party that is yours, for God's sake, go about it with decorum. So basically, violence and non-violence has to do with you, the voter.
Yep.
If you are not violent, there is no need, there is not going to be an occurrence of any violence anywhere. So we as Nigerians, we need to tutor ourselves. And like my brother said earlier, which I reiterated, the peace accord these days is doing a fantastic job. Followers that are good followers are now looking at the leadership and saying, ooh, Oga said we should not do that. More so, the big boss, the principal, is not doing it himself. So it translates to the followership, because
leading by example.
Politicking, it's all about leadership and followership. And you, the voter, you're the most important.
Correct. Mike, let me give you the last word. Briefly, what would be your words of advice to the members
Dennis, is for me providential that we're having this conversation this same week in which the International Criminal Court has discharged or acquitted Laurent Gbagbo of Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
We would like to see a situation where people who cause loss of lives of Nigerians because of elections are brought to account. I would like to see that happen. We have never experienced it in this country. You know, even after the 2011 elections where there was a committee set up and all of that, we have not seen any prosecutions or all of that. So even though we're making appeals on Nigerians, I joined Bola in making appeals to Nigerians to, you know, exercise decorum in the electoral process. Those who will exceed their limits should be brought to account. We must see some of these examples.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we appreciate your comments, both of you, and of course, this is Nigeria Today, and time is no longer on our side. It's been an interesting discussion on achieving violence-free campaigns, and we certainly hope Nigerians have learnt from the conversations here on the program and will apply it come the D-Day. We must thank Mike Utsaha, a legal practitioner and public affairs analyst, and Bola Bakare, president of Truth Be Told Network. We appreciate you both once again for coming on Nigeria Today.
Glad to be here.
Then it's my pleasure.
You're welcome. And to our viewers, Thanks for watching, and remember you can watch this episode or any other online at www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. I am Dennis Adigunloye. Thanks for watching.